Hello and welcome everyone to another week of Conversations with Curtis. My name is Lonnie Davis and I'm the president and CEO of JazzArts Charlotte. And we are so absolutely thrilled to be with you another week. And we have a very, very special guest with us, Mr. Ben Jaffe, the creative director for the world famous Preservation Hall Jazz Band. And so we're very excited to be here and glad that you're here with us. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to Curtis and we're going to get this conversation started. Curtis?
Thank you, Lonnie, and good evening, everybody. Welcome, as Lonnie said, to another edition of Conversations with Curtis. I am Curtis Davenport, and so glad to have you here with us this week. And it's our first get together here in the month of October, also my month of birth. So, this is a great way for me to start the month out in a great birthday present. But before we go any further, let's talk about presents that we have and that we have received here at JazzArts Charlotte. Of course, we want to pay very special thanks to the people who make it possible. Our sponsors, the Arts and Science Council, North Carolina Arts Council, Crown Station, and of course, O's Place Jazz Newsletter. And we thank them for their sponsorship. Plus, we also thank our sponsors, our sustainers, benefactors, maestros, arrangers, composers, soloists, and aficionados, and also our Jazz Arts corporate sponsors. There's just too many to thank all at one time, but we thank you all in our hearts. We do appreciate all that you've done to make sure, as we always say, that jazz lives here in Charlotte, baby. So let's get on to our special guest, as Lonnie said, a gentleman that I'm very, very excited to have some time to speak with this evening. As Lonnie told you, he is the creative director of Preservation Hall, and I guess he is also Preservation Hall legacy, being a second generation of his family to be involved in this legendary musical group and legendary musical area of New Orleans. And that is Mr. Ben Jaffe. Mr. Jaffe, nice to meet you. How are you, man?
Fine. I'm well. I'm doing much better now that I can hear your voice. How's everything up there in Charlotte?
Cool. Everything's fantastic. The weather's pretty nice today, and so no complaints. That's at least a good start. How's everything down there in New Orleans?
Better than some, not as good as everybody, but we're just blessed to be here, and what can I say? This is just something that I look forward to, is just connecting with people who are doing beautiful work in different parts of the country. So I feel a certain connection to you all because we've been up your way, so many times now. We have a great deep connection up there in Charlotte and North Carolina. So it's good to be here talking with you. And I know I can't see everybody out there, but I'm sure a few of the people who are tuning in tonight, and touched to be here with you. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. And as Ben mentioned, yes, Preservation Hall and the Preservation Hall Jazz Band does have a very long connection with us here at JazzArts Charlotte. Of course, many of you who've been to our presentations in the past, you've seen many members of the Preservation Hall All-Stars. Yes, there you see them from one of our recent Christmas shows, and other times they've been up and just joined us and really just taken our music to the next level. So we thank you, Ben, and everybody involved in Preservation Hall for making that happen. So let's talk about it. A little bit about your history at Preservation Hall. As I did say at the start, you are, I guess, as they would call, you are Preservation Hall royalty now, sir, being the second generation, being the son, as you are, of the founder, the great Alan Jaffe. And tell us a little bit, let's go all the way back to the beginning, Ben. Let's talk a little bit about your beginning and the first times that you started to realize that you were really part of something special, being Alan Jaffe's son and a part of Preservation Hall.
Wow. That's such an interesting question, because growing up the way I grew up, the world that I lived in seemed perfectly normal.
Hmm.
I didn't understand that this isn't how everybody lives. Because I grew up around musicians, and I grew up around Preservation Hall, and I grew up around live music. Honestly, it was strange when I would meet another kid whose parents had a normal job. And
Yeah.
as they had to be at a certain place at a certain time, where they actually woke up and went, it, because our life revolved around Preservation Hall, where there was music. 7 days a week there was music going on at Preservation Hall, and we lived right around the corner from Preservation Hall. We could actually hear the music coming from Preservation Hall at our house. And then my dad would often have performances around New Orleans. My dad, one of the reasons he was able to connect very quickly to the music scene in New Orleans, because my mom and dad aren't from New Orleans.
Yeah.
Which is very very interesting. Is they're originally from Pennsylvania.
Yeah, your dad went to Wharton School, right?
Yeah, he absolutely did. Yeah, he went. My dad, he came from a very small town in Pennsylvania, and went to high school at Valley Forge on a tuba scholarship, and then got into Wharton on a military scholarship where he ROTC. So he actually, when he did his basic training, was stationed outside of New Orleans, and had a roommate from Wharton who lived in New Orleans, and my dad was a huge New Orleans music fan, and he would that was really the first time that he started coming to New Orleans, was when he was stationed here. But anybody who knows music and knows the world that you and I live in, there aren't that many opportunities for jazz tuba players. In New Orleans, it's one of the most desired instruments.
Yeah.
So my dad, very quickly when he came to town, because he was very young and enthusiastic, he befriended a lot of older musicians who he had been fans of since he was a kid. I'm talking about musicians who played on some of the Hot Five, Louis Armstrong Hot Five and Hot Sevens.
Yeah.
Those gentlemen were still alive.
Yeah, back then, yeah. Those cats still around, yeah.
They were still around, and that was something that was not easy to track down or to find that information back then, because things were just shared mouth to mouth, and person to person, and you would get a little bit of information from this person and a little bit of information from this person. So gradually my mom and dad over time helped to track down a lot of these pioneering African American pioneers, the pioneers, really, the architects of New Orleans music. George Lewis, Punch Miller, Sweet Emma Barrett,
oh yeah, man,
Billy and Dee Dee Pierce, Cy Frazier, Jim Robinson, Papa John Joseph, who had played with Buddy Bolden.
Wow.
Johnny St. Cyr, who played with Louis Armstrong, and it plays on the Hot Seven recordings. Those gentlemen and those ladies were here. The music that they played had fallen out of fashion.
Yeah.
And the music that Louis Armstrong helped popularize had moved on. And these musicians, for social reasons and for economic reasons, had been pushed really had become marginalized.
Yeah.
And there wasn't an opportunity for them to necessarily have a career the way that we think of having a music career today. Although the musical traditions that they helped pioneer were still alive, and you could still hear those traditions at these very sacred moments, like jazz funerals in New Orleans, where members of the African American community honor the pillars of their community,
right,
with a jazz funeral. That's really a great honor to have music and to have the community come out to celebrate your life. That's a very meaningful gesture here, and that was one of the important ways that music, New Orleans jazz, managed to survive, during the lean years, until there was this, slow building renaissance that Preservation Hall became a part of and helped to usher in a new sort of love and appreciation for New Orleans music at a time when this city and the entire South was on fire for, it was the heart, the center of the civil rights movement. And that's what my parents walked into and helped to create a really the first
first integrated group, I'm guessing, or one of the few.
Yeah, Preservation Hall never had to desegregate because it never was segregated.
Yeah.
So that's something that was never really discussed openly, because it was something that happened organically and naturally. And even though it was part of the idea behind Preservation Hall, the music is what brought people together, and race was somehow not even a part of the conversation. In the same way that I can't, in the church, I'm Jewish, but in the church that I grew up in, because I grew up in churches playing funerals and going with my dad. Everybody I know is Catholic or Baptist. I always thought we were too, until and there was this love in the church, the church that I grew up in. There was so much love in that church, and sympathy and compassion, that was, you could feel that same love at Preservation Hall. And that's where it all got started. That it was a home for those musicians that I talked about. It was a place for them to be honored, and for them to have the music and be performed in a respectful environment, without distractions of trying to, at that time it was very popular for, if a band was playing, that it would be accompanying a dancer or a comedian, or it would be more like a little cabaret show in New Orleans. You would never ever actually just find a band being featured as that was the reason that people were going to a place, was to hear a band, was pretty much unheard of. And so Preservation Hall began just framing this incredible tradition in music and these musicians in a new and meaningful way.
Wow.
Yeah.
It had to be an amazing thing to be a part of. Let's continue on along your musical path now. Your father was a renowned tuba player, and so now are you, playing tuba and bass. What made you, let's talk two parts here, Ben. What made you, first of all, when you may have had other choices, what made you decide to have a career in music following in the footsteps of your dad? And what made you decide to not only have that musical career, but also on the same instrument that he was renowned for playing?
Right. Yeah, I mean, wow. I coming from New Orleans, it never really felt like that I was choosing. That decision was already made. And that's, whether or not I chose to pursue it, that's a whole nother matter. But the decision was already made that I was, that this world was available to me.
Yeah.
That this was uh, a possibility, and that's something I never take for granted. In fact, I mean, I know that was a blessing to have been raised in a community that very few people ever get to experience, and I got to see a part of New Orleans that few people get to see. So I've always taken that very, very seriously, and I've always seen it as a blessing and felt that for whatever reason that I received this blessing, it was given to me to pass on. It wasn't for me to receive and for it to stop there. This was just for me, it was for me to hold on to it long enough to pass it on to somebody. I just happened to be the one there receiving this gift at that time. So yeah, and it's true. I mean, all my dad's best friends were musicians. When we go and do clinics around the country or around the world, and we ask people, we ask the kids, yeah, how many of y'all have know a musician, or how many of you have ever been to a concert before? How many of you have ever seen a live jazz performance? And every now and then one or two kids raise their hands. When we do that same clinic in New Orleans, say, how many of you all know a musician? I mean, 90% of the kids raise their hand. Oh, yeah. And then you say, well, how many of you all are related to musicians? And their hands are still hanging. So it's part of the beauty of this city is it's maintained that piece of its identity through so much. That's how strong the need and desire is to play music here is that it's survived the journey from Africa to New Orleans, and now the hundreds of years that it's been here. Yeah, it's unbelievable that it's to think about that is powerful. It's very powerful thought.
Yeah. So let's talk. I had one question. It's just about, yes, okay, it just came back to me. It went out of my head, came back all of a sudden now. You're talking about when you've done clinics and things with youngsters all around the world. And of course, our JazzArts Charlotte members and supporters are probably well aware that for a number of years, we at JazzArts Charlotte, or JazzArts Initiative, as we were before, would take our young people down to New Orleans to learn and spend some time at Preservation Hall as well. And as you see from the past, yes, there's a few of our youngsters there from a couple of years ago playing over at Preservation Hall. And let's talk about the importance then of education and how, because let's face it, there are some, I'll just preface this by saying there are some music venues that are just that, venues. You come, you hear the music, and that's it, and you go on as a part of it. But Preservation Hall, the whole thing is an experience with the idea of education being paramount. And what made that a conscious choice, I'm sure, for your dad and now for you as creative director, to make education such a integral part of Preservation Hall?
I'm probably the one who realized, because I was raised in it, the environment that my parents created, how much I was learning through that experience. And there was no written strategy or purpose or mission for Preservation Hall to be educational. That word never appeared anywhere. When you look at at the musicians who played there and what was going on there and the information that was being passed and the history that was being shared and the lessons that were being learned from these elder statesmen, the wisdom that was being shared. It's I mean, you don't go to, again, I mean, you don't, I never think about going to church as being an educational experience, but that's really where you're learning life lessons. And it's where you're learning the rules of life and the principles of who you are. And that's what Preservation Hall was for so many people. I did realize as I went through my own, education, through high school and college and, my summer camps and music camps and private lessons and teachers, I started to understand what had been taking place there all this time. And I wanted to find a way to share the same gifts that had been shared with me with others. And that's when we really began focusing on our education program and what was it about Preservation Hall and that experience and New Orleans musicians that make it so special. What are those things that we want to share with others? So I guess when we say education, it's really our sharing information program. That's that's really what I think is important, is for someone to have the experience and let them learn from the experience. Let them come up with their own, idea of what just happened. Sometimes that's not easy, to give somebody an experience, and then you never know, you don't often get to see the results. You never get to see how that impacts the person's life years from now. I've actually been at Preservation Hall any given night of the week. You could go to Preservation Hall and I would inevitably meet somebody who would spot me and come and find me and say, my grandparents brought me here.
Wow.
When I was a teenager, and now I'm bringing my children back, and tears will be coming down their face, because it's bringing them back to a place, but also because it had an impact on them, enough impact that they felt it was important for their children to have this experience and to witness this thing and experience this thing. So that's really been something I've personally taken very seriously, is allowing people to have that experience, that very special, powerful, the same experience that kept my parents in New Orleans.
Sure.
I mean, it happened to them in '61, and sometimes you don't even know what's happening. It's just you're out of your body and something's going on, and next thing you're living here, playing tuba, and and I've seen it happen over and over again. And I always say there's two kind of people. There's people who come to New Orleans and move here, or people who come to New Orleans and then for the rest of their lives wish they lived here.
Oh, that's good. And there we just saw on our screen just a picture of a little bit more of what makes New Orleans so special, the music and just the melding of all types of musical cultures all coming together there. Let's talk a little bit about, since we're still in education, talking a little bit about your education, as we talked about you playing the tuba. Also, you play the bass as well. And one of your teachers, as we understand, was one of the true legends of the bass in New Orleans, Mr. Walter Payton, whose son, Nick, of course, is known to a lot of people, has also been a guest on our show in the past. I'm sorry, Siri just started answering me in the middle of conversation. Always weird when that happens. But let's talk a little bit about learning from Walter Payton. Just what are some of the important lessons you took from that great man?
that Walter Payton was a very important figure in New Orleans music. As he was a part of the transition from that was starting to take place between upright bass and electric bass. So he was also classically trained as an upright bass player. So he was somebody who you would see sometimes subbing or playing with the symphony orchestra. You know, and then there were times when you would see his name on the back of a record playing with Alan Toussaint.
Yeah.
Then you would see him, you know, playing over at Lou and Charlie's with, you know, Ellis Marsalis and James Black and John Brunius and Ralph Johnson and you know that's the person I knew. He was also my grammar school music teacher, and you know, I was very, very close with Mr. Payton and with you know, his whole family. With Nick too, we were just a couple years apart, but grew up, you know, just a few blocks from each other. And you know, Nick and I would play in you know, this one brass band. Really, it was one of the, I believe, probably the first real band that any of us had, with Trombone Shorty's older brother, Jane Band, had a band called the All-Star Brass Band, and I was in the All-Stars, and Nicholas was in the All-Stars, and you know, several musicians that are still playing around New Orleans today. That was our first little, you know, grammar school, middle school band that we would just put together to go out and play for you know, donations, tips out on the square, Jackson Square. So you know, Walter, what I learned from Walter was, I mean, you know, we could be here all night just going through the life lessons that I learned from him. Really, what I learned from him was about commitment and dedication and devotion, and you know, nothing takes the place of hard work and putting in the time, you know. And that's something that I, you know, I'll cherish, you know, having, you know, studied with him, as, you know, being my first bass teacher, is just the dedication, commitment, and devotion to his craft, you know. And then his commitment to teaching others the craft. You know, that's not an easy thing to do, to be a performing musician who then takes the time to put themselves in the position to be a teacher and to accept students into their life. That's a special person that takes on that kind of responsibility.
A lot of giving in that, sure.
Yes, I mean, you don't until you're in that place in life, you almost can never really appreciate truly what it means to be a teacher and to spend time with a student, you know, particularly a committed and a dedicated student, you know. And I was, you know, I wasn't I took my lessons very seriously, and I took my craft seriously. I wouldn't be playing bass today if it wasn't for Walter. And you know, I played tuba because my father played tuba, and that's what was laying around the house, and that's what I heard. That's the sound that I had in my ears. But I played upright bass because of Walter, and because I was inspired by him to put in the time on the upright. And that's really something, you know, that I learned, is just this idea of putting in time on your instrument, you know, what that means. Woodshedding, you know, going in bed and just and like and knocking it out, and it's not coming easy either. You know, it's hard. You know, it's kind of like saying, I'm going to start training tomorrow for you know, one of those Ironman competitions. You know, like what? Really? How do you do that? You know, like, how long does that take to train for? Is it even possible? So, he started me on that journey, and really got me on my way, and opened up his opened up his world to me to share, and I'm forever grateful for that.
That's a beautiful
It,
tribute,
it, it,
man.
yeah, it inspired me to teach. It inspired me to be somebody. And again, I never thought of myself as a teacher. I've always just thought of myself as, I've got some knowledge and experience, and I'm happy to share it with whoever wants to to hear this information. This is a gift somebody has shared with me. I'm more than happy to share this gift with someone else, and I'll sit with anybody and share that knowledge with them.
Yeah, that's really a beautiful tribute to a man and an educator. I tell you, I have heard such wonderful things about over the years. I regret never having met him. I've met Nick and spoken with Nick a few times, but just wish I had the opportunity to encounter his dad, just from all the great things I've heard. Audience, just want to tell you, we're getting toward the bottom of the hour. So in about 15 minutes, as usual, we're going to open up for your questions for Mr. Ben Jaffe. So please make sure, if you're thinking about them, think of that great question you have, maybe a better one than I'll ask, and we'll open it up and let Mr. Jaffe answer. But one thing I do want to get to before we even get to that point is one of the finest documentaries that I've seen in the last couple of years, one that you were involved with, and that is Tuba to Cuba. Yes, that was, of course, the story of, well, I'll let you tell a little bit more about it, but of course, just to tell our audience who have not seen it, of course, it's the story of Mr. Jaffe and taking a group of musicians, Preservation Hall, basically going over to Cuba and getting to work with and form that special bond that was beyond actual language, beyond, say, English, Spanish, or what have you, forming that indelible musical bond. Now, for those who haven't seen the movie, Ben, if you would tell us a little bit about what inspired you to make that trip that started the movie.
I've always been, I guess, fascinated with the understanding the source, and that's depending on what story you hear and what story you're told. You often have to discover that information on your own. And one thing we know in New Orleans is we've had a historic relationship with Cuba and Haiti that had been our most important trade partners, and when Cuba was shut down because of the embargo,
right?
Many people in New Orleans considered that an embargo on New Orleans, because it shut down so much of our shipping industry here as well, and it tore families apart. There were Cuban families living in New Orleans, and there were New Orleans families living in Cuba. So I was always fascinated by this, and if you're from, I would say, if you grow up listening to music the way that I do, you always hear like certain things in the music. I mean, Jelly Roll Morton always spoke about the Spanish tinge.
Yes.
Yeah, the Spanish, and you're like, and you hear it in the music. Like you can hear it in the, you hear it in the in the rhythm of the music. You hear it in Jelly Roll, and you hear it. You hear this kind of this habanera. That rhythm that is consistent through music. You know, I just didn't, you know, I don't understand. Like, we're not historians. We're just sort of, you know, oh, so and so taught me this, and you know, and pass it to me. But then you start hearing people talk. You know, you start hearing some of the songs that people are playing. You're hearing the rhythms they're playing, and you dig back a little further, and you look and you say, wait a second, Godshock from New Orleans went down to Cuba in the, you know, in the mid 1800s to start, like, you know, start understanding the bambula and the danzon and all these rhythms and their connection to New Orleans and their connection to their source in West Africa and, you know, Central Africa and the Congo, and all of that is there, you know. So going to Cuba, it was, I mean, it was more than any of us anticipated or expected, and it was overwhelming in many ways because it was reconnecting musical families, you know. And in some ways, it was the first time that many of us had met people who had an equal understanding of New Orleans outside of New Orleans, you know. I kind of when I talk to people, they're like, well, what's it like in Cuba? I'm like, well, Cuba is like if New Orleans was an island, you know? And then the different cities are different neighborhoods in New Orleans. You know, you go to Santiago, or, you know, Havana's, you know, the very sophisticated, you know, that's the downtown, you know, the French Quarter, that's where all the business is, and you know, that's where all the action is. But man, when you get across the mountains and you go way out to the east coast of the island, you go out to Santiago, where you can almost see Haiti.
Wow.
You know, man, that's like taking like 3 or 4 blocks of Treme, the 6th ward or the 7th ward and the 9th ward, and it's like taking like 3 blocks out of each one of those neighborhoods and turning it into you know, a city of millions of people.
Wow, man.
You know, that's what that felt like. And you know, and even people in Cuba go, when they, you know, they go, oh, New Orleans, oh, you need to go to Santiago. We're like,
They know, man.
Yeah. So that's what it felt like. I mean, you're witnessing the same kinds of traditions that ended up living and breathing in New Orleans, and you're seeing similar traditions celebrating the same holidays and the same events in their unique way, but the spirit and the energy behind it is very, 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 it's very, very close. You know, it's very, very close. And it was just beautiful to watch. You know, it was beautiful to hear them talk about, oh, these musicians from New Orleans would come to Cuba, you know, and they would bring this with them, and they would be dance musicians, and they would do this, and they taught us this, and we showed them that, you know, this was happening, but we all knew this other thing together. You know, in Cuba, there's in New Orleans, Catholicism meshed with a lot of a lot of faith and spiritual traditions mixed with the Catholic traditions in New Orleans. You know, in Cuba, it felt a little more strict, where you had the Catholic traditions, and then maybe when they got home, they would have Santeria and their little shrines. But you would go, I mean, we would go into people's houses, and you would see these Santeria shrines, and they would be the exact same. It would be the same iconography that I remember seeing in my parents' house growing up. You know, these same figurines, and he was devout Catholic, but when they got home, it was, you know, you know, there was no separate. It didn't feel like one was you know, it was one or the other. They just this is you know, the thing. This is how it, you know, their faith was practiced. You know, this is how they managed to continue this piece, you know, of themselves. So that was beautiful to experience that, and to not have to explain your music. You know, it's not often you go somewhere and you don't have to, you know, you can, that happens when we go to Brazil, when we go to, coastal regions in Brazil and really Mexico. I mean, you kind of have to go south from New Orleans. Like New Orleans is really the northern part of the jazz hemisphere. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The jazz hemisphere to me goes south from New Orleans. It's just they call it something different in Brazil, and they call it something different in Argentina, and they call it something different in Cuba, and then once it got to in the United States, it took on this name of jazz. But there's improvised, creative music that comes where the same thread that came out of the Middle Passage, you follow that thread, and you find is it Spanish, is it French, is it Portuguese? The one thing that they all share in common is that there's an African element to it.
Base, yes, that element.
Yes.
Yeah, the bottom of it is that. So Lonnie, before we, I don't know if you have it ready, Lonnie. I think we did have, at least for those unfamiliar with A Tuba to Cuba, I think we did have the trailer available. I know it's something that can be seen. I know for a while it was available on Amazon Prime, and I know there are a number of other places that you can find it. But Lonnie, if we have that available, can we just share with the audience the trailer from A Tuba to Cuba?
New Orleans, this is the place where jazz was born. Understanding our history is understanding the elements that formed who we are. And part of that is understanding Cuba. I got my start playing jazz in New Orleans brass bands. My father played tuba.
It was his idea in 1961 to open up a club in New Orleans. He called it Preservation Hall.
Oh man, it's going to be exciting to jam with some Cuban musicians.
I can't think of a better dignitary than Preservation Hall.
Ladies and gentlemen, the outreach elements of this trip, where our band is interacting with Cuban musicians, is essential.
Through music, you'll be able to start a conversation.
19 hours on a bus across a mountain range.
The closer we were getting to Santiago, man, you could just feel something in the air.
You get more out of life when you believe in building bridges. This incredible musical tradition performed by these pioneers of New Orleans jazz. That's why Preservation Hall is here today.
I feel like Preservation Hall is how it's spreading the word. It's like a bridge to another world.
We came here on this musical journey, and we discovered a piece of us that's been missing.
When the tuba came out, everybody lit up.
Remarkable, man. I love that. Love the documentary, love everything about it. I love watching when all the cats started to jam. It just didn't matter. Everything else melted away. Everybody was learning everybody else's ideas, and that just was totally electric, man. Just thank you for bringing that to us. If I can just ask another question about it. Well, I have two. Now, the tuba is not, it was kind of unfamiliar in Cuban music. Is it not? Or at least, put it this way, in Cuban music outside of the classical arena.
Yes, it's outside of the classical arena, it's not an instrument that you'll find in Cuban music. Traditional, Cuban music. There's a very strong classical tradition in Cuba, which is which still exists there. So that's really the environment that you'll hear a tuba performed in. we did hear a military band there, and there was a tuba in the band. But for the most part, it's an instrument that most people are unfamiliar with there, and because of the scarcity of instruments and the difficulty acquiring instruments, and it's something that we had to, it took us. We still don't understand completely. Because there's so many layers and it's so nuanced. All the challenges that people face with regards to access to instruments and the kind of the ways that people find ways to get access to instruments. It's been part of what we've done since we first went there is we've continued our relationship with the High School for the Arts that we kind of have a relationship with, and every year we bring down instruments for that school. It's something that we all learned after Hurricane Katrina, when really the whole country came to our aid and provided us when we had nothing, So ever since then, it's always been part of our mission, when we can, to make that a priority in our lives, to provide those resources, to our community here and also outside our community. Because it was people outside our community that provided for us.
Yeah. Let me just one more question about it, kind of back to the origins. I know that going to Cuba was a dream, at least I understand, a dream of your dad's. That kind of in doing this, you fulfilled. How did it feel just to know this was something that your dad longed for and that you got to do? Let's talk a little bit about how that felt, man.
Wow, that it would. There's a heaviness to it, It just it feels heavy. My dad passed away in 1987. And at the same time, the gentleman in my band, Charlie Gabriel, my dad and he were the same age, so I was able to bring Charlie with us. There's Charlie right there. Yeah, Charlie's 88. Is 88 now, and spry. Oh man, is he spry?
He looks it, man.
Yeah.
He looks it. Look at those eyes, man.
Yeah, you can see it. He I'm not sure. I got to see what my dad would have seen through Charlie's eyes. So I do feel like my dad did get to go. It's just his body didn't get to go. I got to see, the joy, because it was my dad. He enjoyed those experiences, but he, like myself, created those experiences for other people. That was always part of an important part of the decision making process. Is yes, of course, I love doing all of this. What's important for these musicians? What experience do they want to have? Is this part of their journey? And helping to create a world where those experiences get to take place. That is such a joyful, rewarding feeling inside. It's greater than to me, playing than anything in some ways is just watching these moments and having a hand in making helping to make these moments come to life, connecting, helping connect people.
Yeah. Let's find out, Ben, let's find out if there are any questions from the audience at this point. Lonnie, do we have anything in the queue that we might have missed? Because if not, I'll fill the rest of the time. Okay. Oh, okay. We have one from Barbara Burge asking, would Ben lead a jazz tour to Cuba?
that was actually what we did. That's how we actually funded our first trip to Cuba. And it took us several years to coordinate that. In fact, when the idea for us to go to Cuba, when we walked into that idea and said we're going to figure this out, it was before the embargo, and we already started laying the groundwork for it. Then once the embargo was lifted, that just pushed everything fast forward, and that was when we, had the idea to lead a tour to Cuba, open the tour up to our friends and family, and the people who, our patrons, to come with us, and that was what funded that project. We of course we hope to get back. We've been back several times.
Yeah,
we've brought back. We've been back 3 times with different tour groups now of different sizes, and as soon as we can, as soon as it's safe for us to travel again, it's every year. We've been back every year since, so there was no reason to think we weren't going to be back this year. I mean,
sure.
So,
but yeah, things had other plans. Speaking of the things that make it difficult for us to travel, let's talk a little bit about the pandemic and how it's affecting things at Preservation Hall. How are things going? How are you making it work during this time that's tough for everyone around the country?
Yes, we've Preservation Hall. We closed our doors the second week of March, and we have not reopened for music. Since then. Most of New Orleans is New Orleans is still locked down.
Yeah.
And, we don't have an idea of when, we're going to be able to reopen our doors and, safely have music again there. The safety of our musicians and the people attending our shows and our team members is, of course, the number one, our number one priority. So as much as it breaks all of our hearts to not have shows, we know that until it's safe, it would be irresponsible of us to do that.
Sure.
So what have we been doing in the meantime? Man, we have been busier than ever.
Okay.
We just haven't been busy making music.
All right.
It's kind of the difference. I tell somebody, I said it's the difference between sailing a ship on a nice, flat, smooth, open sea, or saving a sinking ship in the middle of a it's like, you got to have both skills. You better know how to do both things. But right now, thank God we know how to save a sinking ship, and do whatever is needed to be done in this moment, because it's been a challenge, not for us, but all venues, not in New Orleans, all over the country. What I learned from my experience after Hurricane Katrina was the importance of expecting the unexpected and being prepared for the inevitable. And we had in place a foundation that I started in 2012, the Preservation Hall Foundation, that as soon as we closed on, I think it was March 12th around then.
Okay. Within
24 hours, we understood the seriousness of the situation. I made the decision to shift all of our attention to emergency COVID relief efforts immediately. And that is what we've been involved in since that time. And since the very first weeks of COVID back in March, we've been supporting the musicians who make up the Preservation Hall community. And every 2 weeks they've been receiving stipends from Preservation Hall Foundation. It's been a fulfilling, very fulfilling to be able to do this, to provide some relief to musicians who really are this incredible, precious jewel, and we've been out there raising money, doing benefits, and that's really what my focus has been on, is the well-being of these musicians. Many of these musicians have raised me, and this is what I would, this is what you do for your family. This is what I do, for my family. So, we've also been, slowly, dusting off the cobwebs and getting back in, slowly. This is going to be, something that takes time, and it's going to be, stages for us to become who we are today. I mean, none of us are the people we were 6 months ago.
True.
We've grown new skin and shed the old. We've shed the old and grown new. Some of us a couple times already.
Yeah.
Some not. Some haven't done it yet. They need to, but they haven't yet. But and I would encourage everybody, even if it's a good skin you got on, shed it and grow another good one, even better. And
that's great advice, period, man.
You got to keep shedding that skin, keep shedding it. And if it's a good skin, it'll grow back. You know what I mean? And if it's a bad skin, then maybe it'll grow back better. But that's what we got to keep doing, and have to keep our spirits high. This is the world we're in right now. And, this is what we've got. We've got our energy, What's important is to protect that energy, to protect it, and to protect and to recognize the blessings that we are surrounded by. And I have to do that, I have to do that, because there's a lot to be upset about, and a lot to be, frustrated with, and angered by, but there always is,
True.
There always is. So what are we going to do with that knowledge? And I've always chosen to count my blessings, and to use my time to share those blessings. And that I'm grateful that I'm in New Orleans. I'm grateful that that's something that's, and I'll tell you, the other thing that I've done is I just shut off the news and the internet and Instagram.
That's a good idea.
And and just letting my my brain rewire, and letting my the chemical neurons in my brain even out and get back to where they should be. So I think that's important too. Is to you're going to find out what you need to find out. I'm telling you that right now. It's going to come to you.
True.
Somebody's going to text you something to let you know what's going on, or send you an email. I was talking with the other band members, and we were all talking about the same thing, and just saying that it's funny how we especially Charlie Gabriel.
Yeah.
He's a very wise person, and he's lived through a lot. He's lived through he's lived through segregation. He's lived through the civil rights movement. He's lived through Vietnam. He's lived through, I don't even know where to stop. But and now he's here living through COVID, and he's often said, he goes, he'll call me and he says, man, I'm sitting here watching the news. He said, I don't get it. He said, where do they think? He said, what did they think was going to happen? Or where did you think? Did you think that that was going to change that 61 was the beginning? That wasn't the end. So come on, let's we got work to do. Come on. and I really feel that, I really feel that that I take a lot of my a lot of guidance from Charlie and wisdom. I appreciate, that he shares that with me, and those insightful moments that he's like, the work's never done. It's not done. It's not done till till so and so says it's done.
Yeah, that's right.
Until then, we're just humans. We're
You get
humans.
that long distance call,
Yeah,
man.
exactly. He's like, and when that person up there makes the decision that it's time, then just doesn't make any difference at that moment, But until then, you can't give up,
So true.
Yeah.
Just to kind of wrap it up, it's something that I know a few people have been asking in the chat. I'm just going to rip through a couple of things that came through the chat. First of all, from my dear friend Bill Evans. Good to hear from you, Bill. And yes, this will be available when we're done. You'll be able to go back and access it on YouTube, on the JazzArts Charlotte YouTube page. You'll be able to see it. Yes, it will remain, as it says there, on YouTube for rewatch. Also, we had our lovely friend Barbara Burge wanted to know, and I'll ask these two questions together. First, she wants to know, is there any way that we here could contribute for the instruments in some kind of way, help out for the instruments for the young people in Cuba? And I'll also say, is there some way that any of us can contribute for our musicians at Preservation Hall during these COVID times? So I'll ask both of those questions to you then.
Absolutely. You can absolutely do both.
Okay.
We work with a wonderful organization. They're the only organization that's permitted and licensed to bring instruments into Cuba.
Okay.
The name of the organization is Horns to Havana. They're a wonderful organization. They've brought instruments down with Wynton Marsalis and Jazz Center. They've brought down instruments with us. We've brought down string basses. We've brought down drum sets. We've brought down, whatever is needed is what we bring down. We're in such close contact with the professors, and we know exactly what's needed, and we bring exactly what's needed, because it's such a difficult process. We bring exactly what's needed. One of the things that's also needed down in Cuba, things like valve oil, drumsticks, reeds for clarinets. There aren't just, you can't just go down the street to a music store or get online and just click. You have to, pads for saxophones, drum heads, strings for guitars. Those are the little things, like the horns and the instruments tend to get passed around from generation to generation.
Yeah.
It's these other little pieces that either make the horns usable or not usable,
Yeah.
So it's a combination of new instruments, and then also making sure that the old instruments are maintained. Also bringing repair kits for the instruments to Cuba.
Okay.
All those little things, so that you don't even consider, because you could just jump on Amazon or go over to a music store and grab, sheet music. We met a gentleman in Havana who would go every morning to the Central Library in Havana, take a 1-hour trip to the Central Library.
Wow.
And would transcribe music by hand from original sheet music onto paper that he would actually create. He would take blank paper and create staff paper.
Great staff, yeah.
He would create his own staff paper, and you would look at this paper and you would swear that it was done by a computer.
Wow.
And he's been doing this, for the last 30 years of his life, and this is the music that his group plays.
Wow.
And they're featured in the documentary Tuba to Cuba as well. So, pencils, pencil sharpeners. These are
the things we take for granted. Yeah.
Yeah, these are precious commodities. So and anybody's interested in continuing to help the musicians in New Orleans at Preservation Hall. You can go to the Preservation Hall website and make a donation there, of course.
Okay.
And you can make a donation there with if you put a note on the donation, that you want to direct your donation to something specific, it'll be allocated to that.
Okay.
That it'll be allocated that way.
Okay. And now, Ben, do horns to Havana? Okay, I was just about to ask that. Thank you. Thank you for our Jazz Art Charlotte folks for being up on it. www.hornstohavana.org is where you can find that, and also, of course, the Preservation Hall website. Ben, this has been a fascinating conversation. Great to hang with you, man. To get to know a little bit about what's on your mind. Truly been a delightful hour for me.
Oh man, thank you so much, and just bless you and everybody up there, man. It's just it's good it's always good to connect with people, man, especially during this time. Just getting to see some old new faces and hear his voice. That's been great.
Yeah, this is a pretty old face, but still learning a few things. But thank you so much. I'm going to turn it back over to Lonnie in a minute. Thank you, brother Ben Jaffe. Much appreciated. Hope we can get to do this again. I appreciate and we appreciate each one of you that have joined us this evening here at Jazz Art Charlotte for Conversations with Curtis. I'm Curtis Davenport. As always, you can find me at my station, and that is Kurt Jazz Radio. The station, as a matter of fact, the station of the month on Live 365 at live365.com, where you can find the best jazz. So I thank you for listening. We'll catch you again in a couple of weeks, and we'll tell you about what's coming up there. But right now, I want to say goodnight and turn things over to Lonnie to close us out.
All right. Thank you so much, Curtis. And a special thanks to our friend, Ben Jaffe, for joining us from the Preservation Hall. We have to have you back, and we have to find a way to get the Preservation Hall band back here in Charlotte because we love you guys. And so for those of you who may not know more, would like to know more about Jazz Art Charlotte, please do visit our website, thejazzarts.org. There you can support the organization, our educational programs, and also help us to continue programs like what you're seeing here tonight. So with that, I do want to thank you, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a good night.